So you all have come in, you have somehow made it through your Thanksgiving, either with like great gratitude and huge platters of food. Has that been any of you all this past week? Yes, Laramie, I saw you eating some things. How about the rest of you? Come on, I know you want to raise your hands up and get them warm. I know some of you were out of town for the holiday, some of you were with family, some of you had friends over, maybe some of you were thinking about family who's far away, some of you were at a potluck at my house on Friday, again, mounds of really good food. Well, on the actual day of Thursday, Jonathan and I, we got to enjoy that really quiet and rainy, beautiful day. We had Thanksgiving. It was just the two of us, and that was perfect for this year. And as we were, eating and thinking about what we're grateful for, we noted that this year just felt a little bit hard for us since, as many of you know, my mom is in the hospital and she's still there. And then we noted, last year Thanksgiving was a little bit tough too, because Jonathan was going through some of his own challenges. They're not written in the big dusty book of Troop, though, you guys. You're not going to find that story there. So then, there we are, trying to think, what about 2017 Thanksgiving? Now, what was that Thanksgiving like? It was actually the year we got married, so you would think that he and I would know exactly what we did on that Thanksgiving. And you know what? We had no idea what we did on that Thanksgiving, so we had to use Facebook memory function. Do you guys use that? Thank you. To figure out not only what we did in 2017, but then 16 and 15 and 14, which is the start of our Thanksgivings together. We didn't go back any further than that. So some of you laughed. So please tell me we're not the only ones who have to use Facebook function to figure out our lives. Thank you back there in that pew. I appreciate it. And so as we look back through all those pictures, some of the memories, of course, were really, really sweet. And then some of them left us feeling a little bit sad. And that's probably very similar to if you were thinking about your past Thanksgivings. Some were sweet and some were sad. I mean, one year, Jonathan's mom had died about a month before Thanksgiving. And the year before that, my grandmother had died about a year before Thanksgiving. And so as we scroll through Facebook and all those tender remembrances, it just became a time not only for our own gratitude, but just a reminder of how closely life and death are intertwined in our lives. And how important it is to spend some moments just being able to acknowledge that and to remember it. So the past few years, clearly, he and I have had to find our way through the dark in this holiday season that promises big joy to the world. But sometimes it feels like we have to work just a little bit harder than we really should have to, I guess, to find that joy. William Blake wrote that joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine. And that's always true every day of our lives, but it feels like here in December with all these twinkly lights around us, it just seems to highlight the tenderness of those threads. There's so much expectation and pressure to do more than we did last year, to be more than we were in years past, to make everything bigger and better and brighter and more colorful. Emotions are heightened and sometimes feelings are sure to be hurt. And so as we sit here in the midst of whatever, you are carrying at this time of the year, I wonder, do your own divine threads, what do they look like right now? Are they glimmering and shining? Are your divine threads a little bit dull and faded right now, need to be polished off a little bit? Are they feeling a little bit broken off and frayed even? And maybe it depends on the day or even the time of day about how their luster is shining through or not. So if you're entering this, I call it winter holiday season, knowing that some of us do winter solstice and some of us do Hanukkah and some of us do Christmas. And if you're me, you try to do all three of them. Some of you do none of them, and that's okay. But as we're entering this time, which has a focus on family and friends and meaningful connections, that if you are someone who is facing the greenery and the lights and season's greetings with some anxiety or even a little bit of sadness, to just say it's not just you. You're not alone in feeling that. You're in the company of others who are wondering how they're going to make it through this year. How they're going to make it through this year, which is the first time to make it through without a beloved who you spent every holiday with for the past 60 years. Or how you're going to make it through without getting that card or special gift or something from someone who's not able to do that anymore, or how you're going to get it through when your job's shifted, which means your identity has totally shifted, and you're wondering who you are in the midst of all this and what do you have to give. If you're someone whose best friend moved to the East Coast and you always spent this time together and you're feeling a little adrift and wondering, where are you going to hang your hat this holiday? It's not just you. There are others in the room wondering those same things. And you're not alone in finding your way through what psychotherapist Miriam Greenspan calls the dark emotions. So emotions like grief or sadness or despair. And she calls them dark emotions, not because they're bad, not because they're abnormal, not because there's something to be avoided, but she used that term because Western culture often encourages us to just tuck those things away, to hide them out of sight, to make sure that whatever divine threads we are showing to the world are the ones that truly do sparkle. And often we're allowed to feel just enough grief, or to feel just enough despair, or to feel just enough fear, just this much. And if we do any more than that, well, it's either just not really polite to do that to other people, or frankly, it's just not that interesting to other people. Thank you for your big eyes on that one. But maybe you have felt that when you have been the person in the midst of those feelings. I don't think that any of you probably give off that signal to someone who is actually in the midst of those emotions. But when we're the ones holding those emotions, it's a lot to carry, is it not? We're navigating it for ourselves and trying to figure out how we're going to navigate it with these people who are right in front of us. God, how do we do it? How do we get through the day? How do we maintain these connections without actually scaring someone in the other direction? How do we do it? Keeping these emotions just under the surface while we try to engage our lives, and sometimes we just try to pretend like everything's okay. Greenspan says that it's our inability to bear what she calls these dark emotions that causes many of our most significant problems, that it's not those emotions themselves. It's us trying to tuck them away. She says these emotions are conduits of pure energy, and this energy wants something from us. The energy wants to wake us up. The energy wants to tell us something we need to know. The energy tells us to move on and to act in some way. So Mark Nepo tells a story about the power of these emotions in his book, The One Life We're Given, and I've slightly adapted the story he tells, but in it, there is a man who's been racked with grief because his partner has died. And no matter how much he tried, he was not able to connect with any joy in his life. Everything felt flat and deadened. The threads of his soul divine were lackluster. So he was at the Huntington Gardens one day. Here's part of the adaptation. And as he was in the Huntington Gardens, as was in the Japanese portion of it, near the water where those beautiful koi are, he saw a woman sitting there, and they started talking. And as they were looking at the water, she could tell, there's something really troubling this man. She could see the pain in his face, and so she was trying to ask him to bring him out of himself a little bit, and he began to tremble, and he asked her, what's the point? What's the meaning of this life? And she just invited him to take a breath, because that's a big question. And there was a long branch there right on the ground beside him, and she picked it up and she swirled it around in that water there, in that little pond. And she says, it really depends on what it means to you to be alive. It's the only way to get at the answer to that question. So in his sorrow, the man dropped his shoulders, and she gave him the branch, and she said, you go on. You take this branch and you touch it here in the water and see what you feel. So he poked his branch there in the stream, the koi swimming away from the branch. And there was something comforting about feeling the movement of the water up through the branch into his hand and in the rest of his body. And she touched his hand and she said, you can feel the water without actually putting your hand in it. And that's what meaning feels like. What? He looked at her puzzled. He didn't really understand what that meant. And she said, close your eyes and feel your partner who's not with you anymore. You can feel your partner in your heart without being able to touch them. And this is how memory and meaning begin to save us. And the man began to cry, and the woman put her arm around him, and she said, no one knows how to live or how to die. We only know how to love and how to lose, and how to pick up these branches of meaning along the way. So knowing that we have losses and joys and grief and great happiness that is moving us through our own stream of life and into December winter holidays, you have an opportunity to pick up your own branch of meaning and take with you today. You're invited to come down to the altar and receive a branch to take home with you. And I ask you to place this branch somewhere that you will be reminded on a daily basis through this season that feeling a sense of loss also means that you feel a sense of life and love in what you do. And that ultimately, underneath that, we have the ability to connect with a deep joy. It just kind of runs through us, runs through our connection with each other, and runs through this interdependent web of life of which we are all a part. So just as you're moved, I invite you to come down and take a branch of meaning for yourself for this holiday season. So if you haven't already been smelling your favorite fragrant branch, now's the time. It comes from my garden, Troop Garden, Clara's garden. Life surges in the evergreen and in us. This season, may you find a home of peace, love, and hope in your heart, in your memories, in your dreams, until a new way of abiding in this world brings in a deep and lasting joy. We sing together our closing hymn, When We Wend Homeward, number 277, and please